your slide.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning, everybody. This webinar would be...
Morning, how are you?
Fine, and you? Okay, please, if you can just put off your microphones while I'm talking. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, this part of the webinar will be about the quantitative approach, and then Monique will talk about the qualitative approach. I'm Henny Gerber, I'm a statistician with Liminal Research Consult. I have 20 years of consulting experience as a statistician working with masters and PhD students and also lecturers. Now let me just start with this quote. This workshop will be on the proposal, so we'll focus on your design, so your research methodology. So let me start with this quote. To consult a statistician after an experiment is finished, it's merely to ask him to conduct a post-mortem examination. He can maybe say what the experiment died of. And this was from Ronald Fisher, a famous statistician. What you want to avoid is exactly this. You don't want to have a dead experiment. Let us just look at a model that we will use for this presentation. We will look at the technology acceptance model, a very simple model. This will come from your theory. You'll see there's usefulness, there's ease of use, there's skills and attitude. Monique, can you see my laser pointer here? I just want to make sure you can see this.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So these are all constructs or concepts that you measure or factors in your research. Each of these things is measured with a few Likert scale statements in a questionnaire. Now, in this part of the workshop, I will focus only on a questionnaire as a measuring instrument. I will not look at time series or experimental design. You can use a questionnaire as an instrument together with an experimental study, but I will just focus on a questionnaire. And what we will look at is the bigger picture, just give you a roadmap on what you need to do, what must be in place in your proposal. So all of these are the constructs or concepts that you measure, and it's measured with Likert statements. In this case, usefulness influencing or ease of use influencing usefulness, usefulness influencing attitude, and ease of use influencing attitude. And bringing a new variable or a new construct called skills. And if you bring in skills and you look at the influence of skills on ease of use, what will happen? Let us just look at an example of the questionnaire, just a little part of the questionnaire. So there's the technology acceptance. You see it's a 5-point Likert scale going from strongly disagree to strongly agree. Ease of use is the first construct. It's measured by Likert scale statements. If you look at the first one, my interaction with the recommender system was clear and easy to understand. So there's a few Likert scale statements for each of these constructs in your model. There's also biographical information and all the constructs is in here. This is just to give you an example. Okay, let us look at the research process. We will look at problem discovery. We'll touch on the literature study, what you need to look at for the quantitative approach. We look at research methodology. We look at the research approach. We look at the research type, the type of research design. We look at population and sampling very quickly. We look at a measuring instrument, which is the questionnaire quickly. And then we will look at, because we're busy with research methodology, what intended data analysis do you need? I'll do everything very briefly. I just want to give you an overview and what must be in place for your proposal. Let us look at the first step, problem discovery. So this is the first step in the research process. Okay, let's look at the research problem. So what is the research problem? It's a definite or clear expression about an area of concern or a troubling question that exists in literature, in theory, or existing practice. So when you do your literature study, you're looking for that gap in literature. Now, your research questions and hypothesis is used as your starting point. It will guide your research. I will just touch on hypothesis here. Research questions is also used. You can have only propositions or objectives. I'm just looking at hypothesis as an example of this process that we will follow. Obviously, your research questions is related to your title of your research, so it will unpack your research or your title. Now, let us just look at a hypothesis. I will only look at hypotheses. You can get research questions and hypotheses. In quantitative, you can also just work with a research question and do a statistical model. I'll just use this as an example to show the whole process. Now, what is a research hypothesis? It's a specific statement that you can disprove. A specific statement. You can use both research questions and hypotheses in the research. Now, let us just look at the criteria for a hypothesis to be in place. So the criteria for a hypothesis is three things. You must have variables that is measurable. The variables must be testable, and it must be falsifiable, this hypothesis. Now, let me just explain this a little bit more. If you talk about the variables is these constructs that we measure with the Likert scale statements that I showed you in the research model. So say, for example, ease of use consists of 5 Likert scale statements. This construct becomes a variable in your analysis. This variable, or in your hypothesis, this variable is measurable with the Likert scale statements in your questionnaire. Then it must be testable. This hypothesis that you state must be testable. We will look at the hypothesis just now. Now, to test the hypothesis, you need a statistical technique. Remember, we talk about a quantitative approach. So say, for example, you want to test differences in means, you can use an independent t-test. So you need a statistical test to test your hypothesis. And then the third thing is it must be falsifiable. Now, what does that mean? You must be able to falsify the statement that you make. Now, in statistics, we have a null hypothesis and an alternative hypothesis. The null hypothesis is usually the status quo, and then the alternative is usually the research hypothesis. So say, for example, you have a hypothesis that say there is a significant difference in the salaries of the males and females. Then your research hypothesis is there's a statistically significant difference. That's your alternative. And then the opposite of that is your null hypothesis, which say there's no statistically significant difference between the males and the females. And then you'll be able to falsify this null hypothesis by doing an independent t-test and see if the p-value is smaller than 0.05, then you can reject that hypothesis. So then it is falsifiable. Let us look at an example. Skills have a statistically significant influence on ease of use. So if we remember the model, skills is measured, they look at technology acceptance, if you will accept certain technology. Now, skills will be a few Likert scale statements on skills. So we want to see if the skills that will have a significant influence on the ease of the use of this technology. Now, let us look at the first criteria. There must be variables that's measurable. There's the variable skills, which is a construct score. We will look at how to get to construct scores. Ease of use is also a variable consisting of this few Likert scale statements. It's measured by the Likert scale statement, so it's measurable in the questionnaire. This is testable in this case by a simple linear regression to see the influence of skills on ease of use. And then it's falsifiable because we will be able to falsify the null hypothesis. So all three criteria is in place. Okay, let us look at the next step. Now, in the literature study, you must already look at a few things from a quantitative perspective. The first thing is, you will obviously look at your theory, but if you have some sort of a conceptual model, you will get this from your literature study, and you must set up your conceptual model. Say there is a model that's already proposed like this previous one from theory. You just want to bring in one other variable like skills. That would be your model. But then in your literature study, there will already be models that you look at or theory that you need. Then you must choose a validated scale. Now, a validated scale that I'm talking about here is a questionnaire that's validated. So if we look at our conceptual model here, which is technology acceptance, you must look for a validated questionnaire or scale of technology acceptance while you're busy with your literature study. If you're doing your master's, you just need to show you're able to do research, so you can just use an already validated questionnaire, what you will get in your literature study, and use it. If you do your PhD, you want to do a contribution, you start off from a validated scale, and you will get that in your literature study. We'll quickly look at that also today, very quickly. And then when you do your literature study, in the fields you are in, analysis that they propose. That's very important. Okay, so that's in your literature study. I just wanted to point this out, that while you're busy with this, you must already look at these things. Then the next step is the research methodology step. For research methodology, the first thing we want to look at is the research approach. So I'll just look at the research approach first. I will not talk about paradigms and all of that. I just talk about the things that will have an influence on the quantitative part when you do follow the quantitative approach. I'll also look at the mixed method approach. Let me state the two approaches very quickly. Monique will talk about the qualitative approach thoroughly, just to give a broad distinction between the two approaches. Quantitative is about numbers. Qualitative is about words. So this is more interpretation. Quantitative usually need a lot of respondents. Qualitative, you can have a few respondents with interviews. Then quantitative, you have a questionnaire as your research instrument. There's other ways in quantitative also. I just talk about a questionnaire. And correspondingly with the qualitative, there's an interview correspondingly with the questionnaire. There's other things also in qualitative. But this is just the main difference between the two approaches. Okay, if you look at quantitative research, you'll see the 300 there. If you have 300 responses, you can do mostly anything in quantitative research. This is just the rule of thumb. And just to give you context, you need a lot. So say, for example, if your population that you consider is very small, you're forced to go for qualitative. You cannot do quantitative if your population is very small. Say your whole population is consisting of only 30 people, then it's difficult to do quantitative research. Qualitative, usually less. Usually the interviews is less than 30. But Monique will talk about that. So when you decide on your population, and your population will sort of guide you what is possible, quantitative or qualitative, or maybe you want to do mixed methods and follow both approaches. Now, mixed methods help a lot, especially when you do a PhD, because you have much more to work with. Now, let us look at mixed methods. Okay, quantitative, and this is according to the book from Creswell. Say if your approach is mainly quantitative, you're doing a questionnaire. In the questionnaire, you have a few open-ended questions that you analyze qualitatively. You're looking at content analysis, but your main approach is still quantitative. So then it's qual, small letters. This is not a thorough mixed method approach. In some cases, people call it mixed methods, but this is not a thorough mixed method approach. We will look at thorough mixed method strategies next. Then you can have qualitative, say you have 15 interviews and you record a few descriptive statistics in these interviews that you get. Then it's still mainly qualitative with a little bit of quantitative. Then the mixed method follow a proper mixed method strategy. You follow both approaches thoroughly. So you do the questionnaire with the quantitative and say the interviews with the qualitative. Now let us look at the first strategy, explanatory sequential strategy in mixed methods. Explanatory. So explanatory is quantitative. So if you have a questionnaire that's already developed, that's already validated, you can start with the quantitative, you send it out to the respondents, you do your statistical analysis, and you finish it off, and then the next step, you do your interviews with the qualitative and you do your qualitative analysis. And then in this qualitative analysis, you can talk about what you got from this statistical analysis. So say, for example, there was trends in the model or anything that came out here, then you are able to talk about it in the interviews and analyze it qualitatively. But you need to have an already developed questionnaire. The questionnaire must already be valid and reliable. We'll look at valid and reliable questionnaires. Then the next step or the next strategy that you can follow is the exploratory sequential strategy. Exploratory, so you start with qualitative. I just need to point out, you can do exploratory research with quantitative also. Don't get confused by that. Now, you don't have a questionnaire. Say you don't have a validated questionnaire. You're busy with a PhD. So, and you want to develop a questionnaire, then you can use the qualitative interviews to develop the statements for the questionnaire. So you use the themes or the categories from the qualitative, and that will become the constructs in the quantitative, and the codes in the qualitative will become the Likert scale statements in the quantitative. Say, for example, if you can take that example of ease of use. So ease of use would be one of the themes that you extract from the interviews here, and then there will be Likert scale statements for ease of use. Then the next step after this is finished, you send out the questionnaire, and then you do your statistical analysis. But in this case, then you need to do construct validation first in the quantitative side. So that's the exploratory sequential strategy. You don't have a questionnaire here for the quantitative, so you start with the qualitative. Then a third way to do it, I know there's 4 mixed methods. I will not look at embedded and all of that. Then you get the convergent parallel strategy. So you do both methods at the same time, but in this case, remember, you need to have a validated questionnaire here from the quantitative. So if you don't have a validated questionnaire, you cannot follow this strategy. So you do both strategies together. It takes less time because you don't have to finish the one before you finish the other one. But what's important here, you want to compare and integrate the results and interpret it. So if you do your questionnaire here, and if we talk about the research model of ease of use, usefulness, and skills and attitude, if you test ease of use, usefulness, and attitude here and skills, you must also have it in your qualitative. Otherwise, you will not be able to compare here. There can be some things that comes out of this interviews here that will not be there. That's fine, but your main constructs or main variables in your research must be in your questionnaire here. That's valid for the quantitative, and also in your interview schedule here for the qualitative. Okay, so that's the convergent parallel strategy in the mixed methods. So that's your different approaches. We're still busy with research methodology. So we looked at our approach. Is it quantitative, qualitative, or mixed method? Now we want to look at our research design or type of research design. I'm just looking at quantitative now. So your type of research design, how will you decide on your type of research design? You will choose it according to the goal or objective of your research. This is how you choose your type of research design. Let us look at this table here. If your goal is exploratory, and remember now, I'm talking about the quantitative approach, specifically the quantitative approach. If your goal is exploratory research, you can either have a descriptive type of research design or a correlational type of research design. Now, what is a descriptive type of research design? That's when you just want to describe. You'll mostly do statistical analysis with descriptive statistics. So in a master's, you can do a little bit of statistical tests, but your main focus would be to describe. If you follow a correlational design, it will be on relationships, not a correlation on relationships. Most studies is doing this. So then if you have any model or any relationships you're looking at, and that's your main aim, say in your title you indicate the relationship, then you follow a correlational design. And then you do statistical analysis and modeling. Then if your goal is explanatory, you follow experimental design and trying to prove that a certain manipulation worked in experimental design. You can also use experimental design together with a questionnaire, with a pre and post test. Now, there's a bit of a gray area here between these different universities, there's different views on this. A structure equation model, for example, can be seen as correlational design, which is relationships, or in some cases, they see it as explanatory because you have explanatory models. So there's a bit of a discrepancy there. Okay, let us just look at descriptive. So your different research designs. If it's a descriptive design, you just describe what's going on. Mostly descriptive statistics. You can do a little bit of inferential, say, for example, differences between males and females with a t-test, but your main focus is describing what's going on. Then if you follow a correlational design, it's about relationships. So you'll definitely focus more on, say, modeling and statistical techniques. And then if it's experimental type of research design, you'll do experiment. There's also time, there's not time to go into this today, but if time is involved, it's a longitudinal study, and if time is not involved, it's cross-sectional, one point in time. But we don't have time to go into everything. This is just to give you the broader picture and what needs to be in place, and you must report this in your proposal. So that's your research design. Sorry. Okay, so that's still research methodology. The next thing we look at is your population and your sampling. So we looked at the approach, we looked at the type of research design, now we look at the population and sampling. Just very briefly, what is sampling? Sampling is selecting of individual observations from a population. We want to get knowledge of the population. We want to save cost. Just to mention something here, if you have a list of the whole population and you are able to send the email to everybody, then you'll just send the email to everybody and you contact the whole population. You don't do a sample. Because in the end, it's more important to have enough data or respondents to analyze for your statistical analysis. If you don't have enough, then you're stuck if you don't have enough data. Let us look at general concepts. So what is this population here? This is your target population that you decide on. What must be your population? It's important to define it as clearly as possible if you want to generalize. Now, in a lot of cases, people are not able to generalize. Then the sample, what is the sample? The sample is a subset of this population. So you draw from this population. So if we want to generalize from the sample that we take to the population, there's three things that must be in place. And this is now statistical generalization. First, you must have a list of the population, a list of everybody in the population. Then you must be able to randomly draw people from this list. This will then allow everybody to have a chance to participate in this research. And also it will take out biasness. Then the next thing, this sample must be representative. What does that mean? Say if we look at this example of technology acceptance, if we say that we look at new technology, then say, for example, what will have an influence on new technology? Age could be, gender could be, to be representative of the population, you want maybe gender to be representative, you want age group to be representative. So then, say, for example, if you look at age groups, if there's a lot of younger people in the population, there must also be a lot of younger people in your sample. So then it's representative of the population, your sample. Now to get all of this in place, you need to follow a statistical technique that will allow for this, a sampling technique that will allow for this. If these things are not in place, you cannot generalize, and you clearly state there that you will not generalize to the population. Your statistical analysis will only hold for this sample. So that's very important. If this is not in place, you will not be able to generalize to the population. Then sampling techniques, very briefly, you get probability sampling techniques, non-probability sampling techniques. If you have a list of the population and you are able to do a random selection from that list, you can follow a probability sampling technique. and there's less biasness in this. If you don't have a list from the population, it's a non-random selection because you don't have the list. So it's a non-probability sampling technique. There's biasness in it. I cannot go into everything on sampling. I just want to point out the main issues. Then for probability sampling techniques, you get different techniques. Look at stratified random sampling if you want to generalize, because with stratified random sampling, you will be able, with the stratification, you stratify according to age group, so you get the representativity, you do the random sampling, and you do that from a list. But then you need a list of the people and also of that stratification. So if you want to stratify for age group, you need the age group also in your list. Then if you follow non-probability sampling method, you can look at quota sampling, because quota sampling will be the corresponding method that will give you at least representativity, like stratified random sampling. Because with quota sampling, you can sample the quotas until you get enough in each category. So say, for example, you do quota sampling and you do it on age group, then you will keep on sampling until you get enough younger people, that the proportion of younger people is the same in the sample than in the population. There's other types of non-probability sampling methods also, but this at least will give you representativity. Although you cannot generalize, it's a better sampling method because you get representativity. It's not always possible to use this. If you use something like snowball sampling or quota sampling, you must just state that you will not generalize to the population. That's very important. Then sample size. I just want to point out a few things about sample size. There's a lot of things that you must take into account for sample size. That's why it's better to go to a statistician on sample size. What students sometimes do is they just use the sample size calculator and just use that. There's a lot of criteria that is involved in the calculation of your sample. The first thing is this response rate. If you send out questionnaires on the internet, the response rate is 22 to 5%. So if you send out 1,000, you don't get much back. How much is it? If you send out 100, it's only 2. So 1,000 is only 20. And 20 is not enough for analysis. So keep the response into account. The size that you get back for the analysis is what we're talking about. So if we say your sample must be, for analysis, must be 100, then you need to get back 100. So what you need for analysis is what you must think about. Sample sizes can range from 30 to 300. If you have an experimental design with a questionnaire, with pre and post and control groups, and you have 30 people in each, then it could maybe, but that's lower limit for quantitative research. 300 will help, you will be able to do most things with 300. Let me just look at some of the criteria of sample size. Don't worry about this too much. You must just note that there's a lot of things involved in calculation of sample size. The first thing is the central limit theorem in statistics. Let's say if the sample is 30, you'll get normality, but that's if normality exists in your data. But that's just the bare minimum to get to normality. With a questionnaire, you cannot do much with 30. You can have the sample size formula to generalize, if you want to generalize to the population. So you put in the population figure and it will give you a corresponding sample size. So this can be used if you want to generalize. Then validity and reliability of the questionnaire. You must be able to test for validity and reliability of your questionnaire if you don't use a validated questionnaire. So that must be taken into account. For validity, you need much more data than for reliability. Then the statistical techniques. you must have enough data for the statistical techniques. So if you do modeling, you need more data. Say structure equation models, 200 plus, depending on the model that you'll use. So you'll see there's a lot of criteria that's in place here that must be in place to decide on what's the sample size. Say, for example, in this research, if it's a structure equation model and you have 200 plus, you don't generalize, that would be fine. And with a structure equation model, we use an already validated questionnaire, so we don't need data to do the validation. You can also have smaller sample sizes like 100 and also still do your analysis on that. It depends on your research. Okay, let us look at the next thing. We're still busy with research methodology. Now we're looking at the questionnaire or your research instrument. What is the questionnaire? Remember, we're busy with the quantitative approach. The questionnaire is a measuring instrument consisting of a series of questions and scales. This scales I'm talking about here is a scale consisting of constructs, like say something like a personality scale. There's different types of personalities, and then each of the different types of personalities is measured by a few Likert scale statements. So this scales here is a scale consisting of constructs, and the constructs consisting of Likert scale statements. And then in the questionnaire, you'll have your biographical information, and usually if you test perceptions, you have these scales that you work with. Let us just look at the construct. What is a construct? A construct is a theorized psychological construct. It's not something that we can measure directly. We measure it with a few Likert scale statements, and then it will form a construct, hopefully. Example of this is this ease of use we're looking at. So ease of use of this technology, and this ease of use is consisting of a few Likert scale statements. You cannot measure ease of use directly. We measure it with the Likert scale statements, and hopefully this Likert scale statements forms a valid construct called ease of use, and then we can use it. This construct is also called latent factors, it's called themes, it's called dimensions, it's called factors. It's all the same thing, concepts. That's what you measure in your research. So in this case, in this model, it's ease of use, usefulness, attitude, and skills. Okay, it's preferred to use an already validated scale. Say, for example, the technology acceptance, a scale that's already validated, that have valid constructs, which is called ease of use, usefulness, attitude, and intention. Now, for construct validity, you use exploratory factor analysis if you want to do the validation yourself. So that's the first step in construct validity, exploratory factor analysis. Then construct reliability, to see how reliable is this items of the construct. We use the Cronbach alpha coefficient for that. We will look at examples. Then piloting your questionnaire. If you pre-test your questionnaire and if you do look at the content, then of 20 to 30, and then you'll be able to test construct reliability at that stage already according to that. Okay. Let us look at an example, the questionnaire. We look at the technology acceptance scale. So what is important in validation is you always validate to something. So if we validate the construct, we validate the constructs to this technology acceptance. That's the main construct or the main issue we're looking at. And then what is the valid constructs of technology acceptance? This is coming from theory. Now, in this case, in this questionnaire, we have the technology acceptance scale consisting of a few constructs that's already valid. So the technology acceptance constructs or concepts or factors is ease of use, usefulness, attitude, and skills. Skills is the new construct that was brought in this research. So ease of use, usefulness, and attitude already exist in the technology acceptance model. And then this person wanted to see if skills also will have an influence. So skills is the new construct coming into this model here in the questionnaire. And then in the questionnaire, we looked at the examples, an example already. So ease of use, there's the questions, Likert scale statements of ease of use. If you look at the first one, my interaction with the recommender system was clear and easy to understand. So that's about ease of use, these Likert scale statements. Then usefulness, I found the recommender movies attractive. Recommender movies is the system. The recommended movies were adequate for my mood. So this is usefulness. So for each of these constructs, we have Likert scale statements measuring it. But it must be valid. It must be valid and reliable. Now, in this case, it's already validated questionnaire with only skills coming in. So if you want to do a validation, you use exploratory factor analysis. Now, I'll just explain it very briefly, and then I'll look at how to choose an article where validation was already done. So let us look at exploratory factor analysis very briefly. In exploratory factor analysis, you'll put in all the questions that's part of this scale now. If you look at technology acceptance, we'll put in all the questions of ease of use, usefulness, attitude, and skills. And we put it in this factor analysis. And then the first thing for the factor analysis would be to decide on how many factors do we get or how many constructs. And there's a few criteria to decide on how many constructs or factors do we get. I don't want to go in too much detail, and don't worry too much about the detail for now. You need to see the bigger picture, what needs to be involved in your proposal when you do your proposal. And you need to show in your proposal, in your research methodology, your research instrument, is it valid and reliable? This is the validation part. Now, if you have already validated questionnaire, you can just refer to it. I just explained how the process is working. So the first criteria is eigenvalues must be greater than 1. The cumulative percentage of variance must be more than 60%, and you look at the scree plot. Now, the eigenvalues is here, this red in red here. So if it's above 1, it indicates the factor can be used. So if you look at this, there's 4 factors with eigenvalues more than 1, and the cumulative percentage of variance is 68%, which is more than 60%. And then the scree plot, you'll also see 1, 2, 3 factors, and then it tails off. 4 factors, and then it tails off. 1, 2, 3, 4. Based on the criteria, we get 4 factors. And this 4 factors is the 4 constructs. Then the next step is looking at factor loadings. Now, what is a factor loading? A factor loading will tell you in this factor loading matrix, where does this question loads? Now, this is all questions, statements, Likert scale statements. These ones is usefulness, 7 statements on usefulness, 7 statements on attitude, 5 statements on attitude, 3 statements on ease of use, 3 statements on skills. And then this loading here will tell you where does it load. So you can see all these questions loads on the first factor, and all these ones on the second factor, all these ones on the third one, and all these ones on the 5th one. Now there is loadings here, but it's less than 0.3. So if the loading is above 0.4, the absolute value, it loads on that factor. So it means that all these are forming the same factor or construct. All these forming the same construct. All these and all these. Now, this one worked out perfectly because it's coming from a validated scale already. Now, what you then do is you read through the statements here and give it a name, all of them. That's the next step. So you get usefulness, attitude, ease of use, and skills. So this worked out perfectly. Now, these must make sense with your research. And this is now the valid constructs of technology acceptance. And the proof of it is this loadings here. So this is what you're looking for when you do your literature study. You look for these loadings, and then you can use these questions as is, and you have valid constructs to work with. Monique, I see there's 46 minutes. I'll just go on and then hopefully just stop before 60 minutes.
No problem.
Okay, let us just look at how to choose a validated scale. So there's an example. Exploratory factor analysis of latent construct used for measuring public sector innovation performance. So exploratory factor analysis was used to do the validation for public sector innovation performance for questionnaires on that. So you do this in your literature study, and what you're looking for is the matrix of factor loadings. Now, you can see in this article, they talk about the methodology, they talk about exploratory factor analysis, and they talk about some of the criteria they used. You can see there's the eigenvalues. They talk about eigenvalues here also, but they talk about exploratory factor analysis here. So that's what you're looking for. And then you're looking for this matrix. I'm just showing one part of it. There's the matrix. You can see there's the loadings. So in this case, you'll use this one, this one, this one, and this one is part of the first component. And what they'll do in the article is they will tell you what these things mean. What is this component? In this case, it was leadership. So when you go through the articles, you look for this factor loadings. And then you just use the ones that loaded. Just use that ones. Okay, so that's how to choose a validated scale, and that's preferred. If you don't get one, you can maybe follow a mixed method using the qualitative to develop a questionnaire, or you start off from a validated scale, and then you do the exploratory factor analysis yourself. But that can only be done when you get back your data, the exploratory factor analysis. Then the next thing is the reliability. We use the Cronbach alpha to test the reliability. So the items or the Likert scale statements of the constructs must be reliable in testing the constructs. We use the Cronbach alpha coefficient, which is internal consistency. So you can report on the reliability of the constructs in your questionnaire, or the reliability of your questionnaire. You report that in your research methodology. Then each of the constructs in your scale must be tested for reliability. And then what's very important, this constructs here, that's valid and reliable, we will calculate scores from it, and that will become the variables in our hypothesis, testing our hypothesis. So if it's not reliable, the constructs or the items, we cannot calculate a variable score to do the statistical analysis. Then the Cronbach alpha coefficient, the interpretation, if it's above 0.8, we have good reliability, above 0.6, acceptable reliability, below 0.6, unacceptable reliability. There's other schools of thought that just use 0.7. So if the Cronbach alpha is unacceptable for your constructs, then that construct cannot be used in the analysis in your research. But you can use the pilot to test this already if you have 20 to 30 people for your pilot. Then let us just look at this example of the questionnaire. So skills, the Cronbach alpha was reliable. It's above 0.6. Ease of use, above 0.8 even, above 0.6. Usefulness, reliable, and acceptance, reliable. All of them is reliable, so we'll be able to do the analysis. Say, for example, if one of these was not reliable, you cannot go further in any analysis. So then you're stuck. So if acceptance was not reliable, you will not be able to test your hypothesis. Okay, let us look at, that's all research methodology. Then the last thing is the analysis. So you must report in your research methodology already on the analysis that you intend to do your data analysis here. It can change afterwards according to your data, but you must at this stage already say what are you intending to do to answer your research questions or test the hypothesis. If you don't put in the analysis and then afterwards you get your results, you get your from the questionnaire back and you see, but you cannot do the analysis, you cannot answer the hypothesis, then you're in big trouble. That's why you need to state your proposed analysis already in your research methodology. I'll just give you two quick examples, that's all. The first one, say for example, you want to assess the influence of a lot of independent variables. These independent variables could be constructs. On a dependent variable, you can use a multiple linear regression. Say for example, we want to see the influence of ease of use and usefulness on attitude, we use multiple linear regression because it's a technique for the influence. But the dependent variable must be continuous. And these variables I'm talking about is the constructs that valid and reliable. Let us look at a research example. If you want to model a whole framework, then you can use structure equation modeling, like in this case. The Likert scale statements is put into this analysis and it's part of the measurement part of the model. So you don't calculate the composite scores yourself. Now, if you look at the structure equation model quickly, this is the measurement part of the structure equation model. You'll see there's skills with the three Likert scale statements. There's ease of use with the three statements, usefulness with the statements, and attitude. Before you do structure equation modeling, you need to have done validation first. The exploratory factor analysis was done first, so there is validation. So this is only done when you have a validated questionnaire. So this is coming from the validated loadings already. Then the structural part of a structure equation model will allow you to test the hypothesis. So the hypothesis of skills influencing ease of use influencing usefulness, and these two influencing attitude. And that's the full model, and there's your hypothesis. So skills have a significant influence on ease of use have a significant influence on usefulness, and then ease of use have a significant influence on attitude to adopt, and usefulness have a significant influence on attitude to adopt. So you can see from this model here, you'll be able to test your hypothesis. Okay, so that's a proposed modeling technique to be able to test these hypotheses. Now, what's very important, if you just take one thing away from this workshop, is the research alignment. We want to make sure the research questions or hypothesis here is aligned to the research methodology, which is our design, the population, we have enough data, the questionnaire, we have the right questions in here, it's valid and reliable, the constructs, and we have the technique here. So everything must be aligned. And in your literature study, you get your theory, and you can already look for validated questionnaires and type of analysis that you'll do. So this is very, very important, this research alignment. Now, the alignment makes sure that the hypothesis, the model, the questionnaire, and the statistical analysis is all aligned. And this must be done in your proposal before you send it, in the proposal, and before you gather data, this must be in place. Now, what I use to do this alignment, all the students must fill this in if they come and see me, is this research consistency matrix. So you have your literature review here, which is your articles. You have your research questions or hypothesis here. You have your research instrument. Is it valid and reliable? The constructs, the type of variables, the analysis, and the sample size. So in this case, we have articles on technology acceptance. We're on the technology acceptance model. We want to investigate the influence of usefulness and ease of use on attitude. In the questionnaire, we measure usefulness with this 5 Likert scale statements. We measure ease of use with this 5. We measure attitude with this 5. Is it valid and reliable, these constructs here? If it's valid and reliable, you refer to the article where you got the validation, you put that in your research methodology. If not, you must do the validation yourself with exploratory factor analysis, but this can only be done after you get your final data back. And if it doesn't work out, you're in trouble. Then the variable types will be construct scores that will be calculated from all of these. So we get 3 new variables from this. If it's valid and reliable, it will be considered as continuous now, not individual Likert scale statements, which is ordinal. And then we can do a multiple linear regression, or you can do the structure equation model. In this case, we just do a multiple linear regression. Is the sample size large enough? It must be large enough for validation here. It's already valid, so that's not the problem. And then the statistical technique, the sample size must be large enough for multiple linear regression. Okay, so just to conclude, for the proposal for your write-up, if you look at a research problem, in this case, we have hypotheses. In this example, in the literature study, we got the theoretical model, which is the technology acceptance model, and we just wanted to bring in skills as a new variable. We have a validated scale. It was validated in literature already, and then the validation is just further done with exploratory factor analysis with that skills that we saw just now. Then intended analysis is a structural equation model and the exploratory factor analysis before that. Then the approach is quantitative. The research design or the type, the goal was exploratory research. We used a correlational design. Now, in this case, there can be a little bit of discrepancy. In this case, it's still correlational because we bring in skills. In some cases, they can see this is confirmatory, then it's another type of research design. But in this case, we have a model, so it's relationships, so it's correlational design. Then the research instrument that we use is valid and reliable. The exploratory factor analysis gave us the validation, and the reliability was the Cronbach alpha that we did, the Cronbach alpha coefficient. The population and sampling, we had a list of the population, and a stratified random sample was taken, and the sample itself was 200 plus. And then the analysis that we did was a structural equation model. Okay, Monique, I'm finished. Maybe if I can allow for is it 10 minutes? Is that fine?
Yes, that's perfect. No worries.
Okay. I went through very quickly, but I wanted to give you everything that must be in place. Is there any questions at this stage? Or Monique, did you see something? I can't see my chat now.
There were 2 questions in the beginning of your presentation. I'm not sure if they are still relevant or if you have answered them. One of the questions was from Lefuno. Please, oh, sorry, that's me. Let me just see what Lefuno asked. Who should validate my questionnaire? And
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing, if it's a master's, look for already validated questionnaire as you saw in this article. Look for that and use it as it is. If it's a PhD and you want to bring in something new, you need to do the validation yourself after you get back your data. So there's a risk involved. And you can only get it back because you need 100 or 150 or 200 to do the validation. So what I would advise then is do a pilot with 20 to 30 and test reliability and refine your constructs and then you do your validation with the exploratory factor analysis. And then with the exploratory factor analysis, you sit together with the statistician, and then because you must provide the names of these constructs that comes out, and it's coming from your research. So then you can do that. Or if it's a PhD, in some cases, they do two analyses, two studies. They do the validation in one study and the model in another study. And the other option is if you follow the mixed method route, you do the interviews first, and to develop your statements, then you need to do the exploratory factor analysis when you get back all your data. But again, I advise on the pilot or 30 to at least test the reliability. You will not be able to do test validity before. Okay.
Thanks, Eni. We also have a question from Bernadette, but I do believe you have already answered it within your presentation. Which research designs do you follow for mixed methods?
Mixed methods.
Yes.
It is difficult to say. You follow the strategies I talked about, and then for quantitative, you'll follow your research type of research design according to the goal of the qualitative, the descriptive, correlational, or experimental. So usually it's correlational, and then with the qualitative view, you have your corresponding research design in the quantitative. I don't know the quantitative well enough. So you can have different type of research designs. Okay, it will not make sense if you have, say, descriptive in the quantitative side, and then, yeah, with qualitative, it will probably fit anywhere. Yeah, it will probably fit anywhere. Quantitative can fit descriptive design on the quantitative side, and correlational, and even experimental. But you will split it according to the approach. So for each approach, you'll choose your research design type.
Carl has also mentioned, if a mixed method, how big should the sample be for a quantitative?
Mixed method?
Yes.
Okay. Again, there's a lot of criteria, a lot. So if you need to do the validation and you follow a mixed method, you develop the questionnaire first, you'll probably need 150 at least to do validation and some modeling, but it can only be determined after you looked at your model or your intended model, how big will it be? So it's difficult to say.
We also have another request. Could I request your office to search for validated scales?
Yeah, the thing is, please just click on the website and do a consultation for an hour, and we can help you. I help students, and we look quickly on the internet, and I just give you, because there's certain words you can look for. You can say for validated with your dissertation title, but we can help with that.
Another question is, if one of the factor is identified through the Cronbach alpha to be unreliable, is it a mistake just to remove that one factor that is not reliable, or what then should be the way forward?
Okay. The first thing is, if you have a lot of statements, you can take out statements and improve reliability until a certain point. If that's not possible to improve it till it's reliable and it's still unreliable, then you must state that you can not use it in further analysis, and then you must take it out of your hypothesis. So you must change your hypothesis and say that's not testable then. But that's why it's very important to make sure your dependent variable is always reliable, because in a model, because then the whole model falls flat. But if one of your independent variables is not reliable, then you just report and say you cannot go further with that, and you will not test that hypothesis.
I think we have two more questions. What are the current trends in publishing, quant, mixed, or qual? And are there any criteria for randomly drawn from a population? So I think it's two questions.
Okay, the first one, that's a very difficult question, but
yeah.
They use mixed methods a lot in PhDs these days, a lot, because you have a lot of information. But that's a very difficult question to answer. But for PhD, mixed methods. Maybe for your masters, choose one of the two.
Just to add to that.
Yes.
Just to add to that, if you think about doing a mixed method study in your master's, one thing that you need to think about is time as well, because mixed method means that you are conducting two studies at the same time. So it might take a bit longer than just having a normal study for quantitative or a qualitative study. So if time is a problem, you need to consider that as well, for instance, because a mixed method does take more time than just a normal quantitative or qualitative study.
Yes, and also the cost, double the cost.
The last question that we have is, can you please share how the Cronbach alpha can be converted to the 0, point.
The Cronbach alpha must be converted to what?
Yeah, can you please share how the Cronbach alpha can be converted to the 0, score?
The 0, score, that 0.6.
So yeah, yes.
Okay, so let me just. Yeah. In your statistical package, say in SPSS, you put in the 5 Likert scale statements for skills. It gives you the Cronbach alpha value, the overall value. You can think about it as a sort of a overall correlation. So you can test that in your, when you do a pilot with 20 to 30 people, you'll have enough to do the Cronbach alpha. So I would advise them to do the Cronbach alpha for all of these constructs. So you do 1 here, 1 there, 1 there, 1 there. But the statistical analysis used that 5 Likert scale statements to get to this figure. Okay.
Seems like that is all the questions for now, Henny. If you guys have any questions and we did not address it today, like I've mentioned, you can go to our YouTube channel, and within this video that we have uploaded, you can place a comment and we would be able to address it. Thank you so much, Henny, for your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Monique. I must, what must I do? Just stop my share.
Yes.
Okay, everybody, good luck with your research.
So I think if we can quickly take a 5-minute break just to stretch our legs and just to kind of get a coffee quickly, and we can start at 11:25 with the qualitative part of the presentation. So the Zoom will still be open. You can just quickly stretch your legs and I'll see everyone back at 11:25.